Thank you for attending, everybody. Good afternoon. And if you are joining us from the other side of the world, good morning. If you see the trivia, did you enjoy estimating the value of the White House? I did the calculation on the cost per square foot. It's 55,000 square feet. So each square foot is $611. That's much cheaper than here in the Bay Area. And those lunar real estate investment opportunities were interesting. I haven't considered moving to the moon myself, but perhaps someday you or someone you know will have an address in the lunar apps or the Sea of Tranquility. You may think it's unlikely, but who can say it won't happen? After all, the future is full of uncertainty. Who could predict in 2019 what a difficult year 2020 would be? On the bright side, we're all tougher and wiser because of it. If you're an investor or business owner, you should always be prepared for the worst, whether the threat comes from lawsuits, taxes, or a global pandemic. We always have to have our shields up. Hi, my name is Coco Tan. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Realty in the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome to session 3 of Investors Medley. If you're not subscribed to me on YouTube, you should scan this QR code. Subscribing to my YouTube channel is the best way to stay up to date on my newest listings, videos, and time seminars. My WeChat code is here. You can connect with me to be notified of upcoming videos, seminars, and off-market listings. If you have attended some of our previous sessions or seen them on the YouTube channel, you have learned about tax strategies, business structures, and even some estate planning. This week, we're tying all these concepts together so you will be able to understand how they relate to asset protection. If you are new, or if there were concepts that didn't completely make sense before, this would be perfect to get caught up. The knowledge you will gain today will be your guide to mitigate risk and protect your assets. Now, it's time for our expert guest. It is my honor to welcome back Michael Lee. You may remember him from the extremely educational and engaging California Prop 19 time seminar last December. Michael is the managing partner of Ray Attorneys, a premier Bay Area law firm specializing in estate and tax planning. He has taken time out of his busy schedule as a professor at Santa Clara University Law School. As a matter of fact, he's actually teaching tonight. So he's giving us this educational opportunity. Just as a reminder, if you have a question for Michael, type your question into chat to one of our co-hosts, and we will include it into the Q&A session. Michael, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you so much for welcoming me, Coco. I'm glad to be back and glad to be with you at the end of January because some things have changed since we last met in December.
Thank you so much, Michael. I know you're busy and you actually have a class tonight at Santa Clara University. I really, really appreciate your generosity in sharing your knowledge and your time here. So.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. I think we have a lot of fun, and it's really a real privilege to chat with everybody because we're now about 2 months into this Proposition 19 business. That has proving, I think, much more complicated than everybody expected. We've had a big political change. We've had a lot. So I will be able to have at it in our hour here, and we'll kind of be covering a lot, but we'll try our best to get through what we can. And of course, happy to take everyone's questions.
Great.
Yes. So shall I just jump in and I'll put my slides up here. So let's take a look here. Let's see.
I like your title, Estate Planning, Interesting Times.
And I have this as a joke. Thank you so much for noticing. So, of course, I'll just give the quick introduction to myself. I think most people already know me. So I'm Mike Lee, general partner of RUI Attorneys. I'm also a professor at law at Santa Clara University, where I teach two very different classes, which is very interesting. I teach gratuitous transfers, So I teach the taxation of estates and gifts. And I also teach bankruptcy. And a lot of people laugh and they say, those make no sense. And I say, oh no, they make perfect sense. I work with people who either have too much money or not enough. So I have both ends of the situation. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, because this is really two sides of the same coin, because we're really dealing with risk. How do we move things around to transfer, to ameliorate risk, and then to make things safer? So of course, that's an introduction to myself. And then of course, my partner, Xiaowei Li, our native Chinese speaking attorney, who also handles a lot here. So Coco astutely observed our theme tonight. I have this as a joke. And again, people who know my background, my father is Chinese, my mother is not Chinese. So I've had this sort of mix of a Chinese heritage and a very American heritage. And there are some expressions in English that for some reason we attribute to the Chinese language. And I ask all of my Chinese friends and none of them have ever heard them. But here's one that's really common, and some of you may have heard, is that there's an ahistorical English oral tradition that says that this is an ancient Chinese curse. And that they said that there is some Chinese phrase that says, if you want to curse someone and say something, some negative wish, you say, may you live in interesting times. And the funny thing is, every Chinese person I've ever talked to says, I have never heard any Chinese expression like that. I think it comes from English, an English expression, but we use it a lot and it's often attributed as a Chinese expression. But I think just as Coco said, this is what we have now. We are living in interesting times. We now have things that I really never really, I think, expected to see. And our interesting times are this. We are, of course, still living through the COVID-19 pandemic. There is a global health crisis, and particularly in our own state, in California, the Bay Area a little bit better, but Southern California, Los Angeles, really feeling the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis in our local economy, in our real estate markets, really throughout the economy. We're feeling, the interesting times. The other consequences we're feeling are of course, a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the classic ones is the hospitality industry has almost been totally destroyed. I have a number of clients, some of them are restaurant owners, or they were landlords to restaurants, and that entire business, the hospitality business, has been destroyed. And it's a secondary consequence. It's not the direct health consequence of the pandemic, but feeling the pain. The other thing that was very different than when I met with everybody last year in December is we've had a major political change in the United States. We've had a political change in power. And the funny thing is, this is why, of course, making political predictions is kind of a fool's errand. And I always should remember, if I'm making political predictions, I'm probably going to be wrong. I was somewhat, my bet was that the Georgia Senate seats would not be a 100% Democratic pickup. I thought, well, maybe 50-50, but I thought, oh, maybe it's going to be a little bit hard for the Democrats to pick up those seats. As we know, boy, was I wrong. They picked up both of those seats. So of course, as we know now, the Democrats in the Senate are now 50-50, and our own Kamala Harris is now the vice president, who would cast the tie-breaking vote for anything that's a tie. Of course, Biden now became the president, so the Congress and the presidency are in Democratic hands. Not what I predicted in December, so that's causing some interesting times. In addition to this, the U.S.-China relationship still remains frosty. Maybe it will get a little bit better under Biden, but it's unclear. There is some frost there and chill on the relationship. So that has been complicated for cross-border transactions and things like that, and really too many other things to list here. So these are our interesting times, and really what I'm just going over are some overview items of things that are risks and threats. So I think this is what we're trying to think of, is that live in a complicated world. And what we're trying to do when we're looking at our investments or our personal estate planning, like anything, is we're trying to determine what risks are out there and then prioritize them. Because there are many, many risks. There are risks, of course, there's the COVID risk, but there's also the risk. I was coming into the office today, and can you believe it was very, very early in the morning, and there was frost on the stairs. And when I was coming up, I had kind of slipped. Of course, the reason I slipped was because I wasn't holding the rail because I'm afraid of COVID, so I'm not touching any of the rails. And then I nearly fell down the stairs. And I thought, that's the classic weighing risks and options. I thought high priority risk, COVID, gloves, mask, don't touch anything. And then of course, the stairs were icy at 7 a.m. this morning, and I almost fell down. And again, maybe I probably should have weighed the risk of the icy stairs higher than the risk of COVID on the railing. But again, that's the kind of calculation that we're trying to do. Three things that I was kind of taking a look at, and of course, there's many, many more, but things that we can speak to today. COVID, two different directions of potential risk on this. One is, of course, loss from COVID. And we're seeing this in a number of different permutations. One channel is the direct loss from COVID, such as you own a restaurant. And what do you do about that? Does the payroll protection program help you? Can you get a PPP loan? Can you get a distress loan? What can you do there? Are you affected in a secondary way? I have many clients that have secondary liability or concern on this, is that they say, well, I don't own the restaurant, but I own the building. And they, I feel for them. They can't pay the rent, but I also have a mortgage. How do we deal with this? Because they feel I'm pressing on them, but I also have the feeling of, well, yeah, but JP Morgan Chase is pressing on me. How do we balance this so that we can share the risk, share the burden? The other thing that's a little bit more complicated is the potential liability for COVID-19. This has become somewhat complicated recently of what can we do to prevent a particular situation. I've had actually a lot of real estate agents and brokers ask me about this. I've had different persons, luckily, California Association of Realtors came out with a set of forms and for showing properties and best practices for COVID. But how do we deal with, okay, I have a shop or I have a business or I have something. How do I limit liability? What if somebody gets COVID and they say, I got it in your office, I'm going to sue you? There's another area. So we have COVID risk from those directions. The other thing that is really actually the focus of my practice, and is really where I spend more of my time, is we have a lot of tax uncertainty. I was much less concerned about the tax uncertainty last December than I am now. One of the first things for clients is, the question is, will the estate tax exemptions go down earlier than 2025? Right now, they're 11 million per person. It's about 11,600,000, but let's say 11 million per person. We know 2025, they're going to go down to 5 million per person. But are we still on that schedule? Is Congress going to lower them earlier? And are we so certain that 5 million is going to be the floor, or are we going to go back down? There is some talk that it could go back down to 3.5 million per person. So in that case, there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's also a lot of uncertainty and a lot of planning concerns, is that one of the things that happens when you have, of course, a new president come in of a new party, all of the upper level officials in the Internal Revenue Service are replaced. And when they replace all the upper level persons and officials in the IRS, part of the law gets redone. So of course, for tax law, there's the Internal Revenue Code that's passed by Congress. Maybe we'll see changes there. But there's also the Treasury regulations and then interpretive regulations that's actually not passed by Congress. Oftentimes it's internal rulings inside the IRS, and that depends on the persons in the IRS. So of course, there's a public process where they sort of propose the regulations and they give everyone notice. There may be some changes there, particularly using family limited partnerships and things. There may be some changes. The other thing, thinking about tax uncertainty, will income taxes go up? I hear a lot of worry. I think right now we don't know, but some concerns that the step up in basis may be repealed. And then there's some concern that corporate taxes for the corporation may go up. Right now they're 20%. I've been hearing 28.5 maybe where they're going. So income tax and estate tax questions. And then, of course, there's a U.S.-China issue. Will there be tariff relief or not? A lot of my clients in the building industry are very concerned because right now there's the tariff. Some rates are as high as 20%. And of course, it's harmed a lot of, especially people in the home improvement industry, used to use a lot of Chinese materials to do finishing work for homes and different things like that. And then all of a sudden it became 20% more expensive. Will we have relief there? Will we not? So this is sort of what we were seeing there. What are options to protect your assets? And we're talking about generally. Here are some things that I've seen in really the last 2 months of trying to come up with a theme of things that people do wrong, that I would kind of guide people of what not to do, what to be careful about. One of the biggest things that I see is people fail to plan, and people fail to do a number of things. People don't do their estate plan. They don't do the revocable living trust, the wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, or they do them and they never update them. Or people say, okay, I've already done that. People fail to do their business documents completely. I see this all the time where people say, oh, I have a corporation, I have an LLC. I got on the Secretary of State's website and I paid the $100 and they gave me a piece of paper, says I have an LLC. There it is. I've got it. It's right there. I say, well, do you have anything else? Did your other members sign anything? Do you have an operating agreement? I say, no. I have the thing from the Secretary of State. It was $100. That's not going to do anything. That's not going to work. I've actually seen a lot of people have some challenges, especially for their PPP loans. Oftentimes, the SBA will ask for the operating agreement and all of these things, and they don't have anything. And it's hanging up their PPP loan because they need all of the members to authorize it. So, of course, failure to plan is a problem. We'll talk about some ways to plan in a moment, but that's a big problem that I've seen. Underinsuring, especially life insurance is part of this. I'm seeing many persons carrying either for businesses or for their personal life insurance, they're underinsured, and they are sort of minimizing payments now, but it does place them at a high amount of risk. Failure to diversify assets and risks. This is, of course, a kind of a classic investment protocol. The last two are interesting, and I started to see these recently because of the COVID crisis, and people started to have concerns about liability. And this basically comes from this situation. I've had a number of people who've breached or abandoned commercial leases, and they said, oh gosh, this is not an unusual example in the Bay Area. I had a client, the lease space for the Palo Alto space was $50,000 a month, and they still have 3 years left on the lease. And the business is totally non-functional. The business can't operate a lot. So they're facing multi-million-dollar lawsuit for failure to continue this lease. What's the concern? What not to do? The clients sort of first thing when they contacted me when they were faced with the breach of the leases, they said, "Well, I'll just transfer all of my assets. I'll just give everything away." That doesn't work. You're not the first person to think about this, even since it's called the Statute of Anne from the 1500s. People have, when they got into trouble, giving away stuff and hiding it is a human thing. We've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and the law's been fixing this for hundreds and hundreds of years. So one of the things not to do is if you're engaged in an active business, you're a real estate owner, investor, a high net worth individual, average net worth person, is you can't plan during the crisis. You have to do the plan before. So you can arrange your assets in a safer, more protected way, but you have to do it before you have the crisis. Once you breach the lease, once you have the lawsuit, and you say, "Oh, okay, I'll do some asset protection trust planning, I'll do some life insurance planning, I'll do some real estate planning." Well, it's too late. Anything you move is now what's called a fraudulent transfer. So you can't just give it away. While before the problem, you can do appropriate transactions to protect these things. So again, waiting and then committing a fraudulent transfer, one doesn't want to do this. And I already mentioned sort of the other one, failed to document transactions. This is what I'm starting to also see: real estate investors and real estate co-owners. And there's I think it's a Kennedy quote from the 60s and it probably is older than them. And basically the quote is that they say success has 1,000 fathers and failures an orphan. And this is what I often see with real estate investors or co-owners, and not just real estate, also in a business, is when the business is successful and everything's working well, people tend to fail to document. People don't write things down. People don't organize. People have that single sheet from the Secretary of State. And then, of course, everybody's making money. The rents are working well. Everybody's dividing it out. There's plenty of pie for everybody. Everything's fine. And then now, with COVID, the tenant's not paying the lease. We owe the mortgage, but actually the mortgage is only in one of the partners' names because he was able to get a good rate. I'm not on it, but I'm also the owner, and we have to make these mortgage payments. But again, the tenant's not paying, and then of course the person who has the mortgage in his own name says, "Okay, guys, you got to kick in your third. You got to kick in your third for the mortgage." And they say, "That's tough now. Next month I'll give you two next month." And then that person says, "Well, what do I do?" Well, we look at how you documented the transaction, what you can do. And a lot of people, it turned out, "Oh, well, everything was fine for a long time and there was plenty of pie to go around. We didn't talk about how we divide it up or what to do." There's a problem. So that's sort of what, not to do with these things. And a lot of times, the reason why I talk about this, what not to do, is because I think many people on with us, I'm sure some of you, when I mention some of these things, think, that property I own with my brother or sister, we never really talked about how we're going to do that. Or, something that I have a group investment, we never talked how to do that. Or my estate plan, I haven't looked at it for 5 or 10 years. We have some problems. So what can we do? Another thing that I say no to, that I recommend also being careful with, especially now in this Prop 19 environment I'll talk about, is say no to fast food estate plans. I also see a lot of these out there of, the problem, and I usually contrast this. So think about a tax return and think about an estate plan. So a tax return, if I earn the same money as someone else and I put in the numbers, shouldn't we always get the same answer? Yes. A tax return, if I earn $200,000 and my brother earns $200,000, and we, of course, they're from different companies, different things, all of that, and he has a wife and 2 children, and I have a wife and 2 children, shouldn't we get exactly the same number? Yes. In an estate plan or in a tax return, a Form 1040, we should get the same number. We should pay the same tax. There's a harmonizing result of the way a tax return works. But that is not true for an estate plan. An estate plan, they're not all the same. If you're a family of 4, husband and wife with 2 children, I'll tell you, I've been doing this 15 years or so, people don't always have the same thoughts. I bet you're not going to have just a canned thought. And that's my recommendation for, again, no fast food plans. Estate plans, unlike tax returns, are not really supposed to look the same. They're supposed to match what you want. And they're supposed to match, do you want the children to receive everything at 18 or everything at 21? Or do you want them to become trustees, or do you want the trust to distribute over a long period of time? You should be tailoring these. I've been seeing a lot of people when we sometimes do trust review, and I tell them, well, this is what your trust does. And people say, I never wanted that. Where did that come from? I said, well, it's just in the canned thing. They just put your names in and gave it to you. We have to think a little bit beyond the fast food estate planning. The second thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is a big one, and this maybe is going to get a lot of questions, but I'm willing to dive in here because we've been doing this for about 2 months now. Please use caution for Proposition 19 planning. We have a deadline. February 15th is the last day. That's when the law takes effect. The law takes effect the day after, February 16th. February 15th is a holiday, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to be able to report anything on the 15th. So again, 15th is a holiday, 14 is Sunday, 13 is Saturday, 12 is probably the last date. But take a look, Alameda County in that week has a county holiday. So they're not going to record on one of those days. So be very cautious, again, doing the Prop 19 planning, especially if you're mailing the deed in or dropping it off. Talking to Fong La, the assessor for Alameda County, he says they have about a 3-week backlog. He says you have to electronically record. That was his only thought. He said you have to use someone who has electronic recording. Like my office, we can electronically record the deeds. So we don't use the mail system. We record it into the title like the title companies do. If you're mailing it, you have to do some extra work to be cautious. So some of the caution. I want to talk a little bit about this. Again, last time we dialed in and we were really talking about Proposition 19. Basically, the Proposition 19 is after February 16th, and starting February 16th, the parent-to-child exclusion for property tax reassessments for change of title is considerably changed. The exclusion for rental properties, so for secondary properties, is terminated. You're currently under Proposition 58. Husband and wife, or each person, they have a $1 million potential sort of credit that they can protect reassessment on rental properties. After February 16th, well, actually starting February 16th, that's gone. So anytime you give or you convey by will or trust rental property, after February 15th, 16th, it's going to be reassessed. The old system is over. And for primary residences, there is now a cap that you can only exempt $1 million. So you take the assessed value, you basically add $1 million. If the fair market value is over than that, that amount of overage gets added back to your children's assessment. So the old system again, where you could give a primary residence from parents to child, and it was unlimited, the exemption, that's over. In addition, now the children have to live there. And like Coco was mentioning, is we were expecting, they called it interpretive guidance from the Board of Equalization. And the Board of Equalization kind of said, we'll get to it. This is just like there's a lot to do. And we only have a handful of people here trying to figure this out. We haven't really gotten the interpretive guidance. So how long do children have to reside there? We don't know. But I wanted to back up a little bit. And try to take a more global view of the Proposition 19 consideration, because we've been counseling a lot of clients on this. And for as many people that I say, okay, let's do some kind of transfer, I'm having many, many people that I'm saying, you shouldn't do the transfer, because people are not looking at the transfer globally. And here's the way we have to take a look at it and think about the transfer. Local property tax. Yes, we do want, if we have parent to child, we do want the child to be able to keep the low property tax basis and not have an increased property tax basis from whatever the parent's basis was to what's going to happen potentially far in the future. The concern is, though, that's not the only consideration here. So thinking if we were just going to do a straight transfer, I'll talk about another way to do it in a moment, but if I was to just gift the property, either a primary residence or a rental, I really have to think about two other major tax considerations, and actually even one other thing. So one of the things that we have to think about for gifting this property, so I've had a lot of people where they say, oh, there's a little bit of, I want to keep the property tax basis for my kids, or one of my kids, I'm going to just give him the property. Well, do be aware for capital gains. When you give property, you give real estate, it's called carryover basis. So whatever my federal income tax basis is in the property, when I give the rental property to my son, he takes my basis. Unlike if I died and it went through trust, he gets a step up in basis and it will wash out the capital gains. So if I bought it at 500,000 and it's now worth $1 million, if he got it through, again, my passing, his basis would be stepped up. It would be $1 million. If he sold it, he'd pay no capital gains. But if I give it to him and then he decides to sell it the next day, he has capital gains on $500,000. And again, the highest rate is 20%. Plus California, which doesn't draw a distinction between capital gains or ordinary gains. It can be between 8 and 13%. So we have to be a little bit careful, because I've seen some clients, and we've been doing the analysis, and I run into some people that I guided, we better be careful, is where the property tax issue may not be the main issue. People are so, I have to get the deed in, I have to preserve the local property tax base. I say, okay, but is that worth the sacrifice of the step up in basis? And sometimes if there's a lot of built-in gain, maybe it's not. Because if I sacrifice the step up in basis, they will be stuck when they sell it, that they will have to pay the capital gains based on my basis. The other thing is you have to be aware of what is the applicable, basically marginal tax rate of the grantee or the grantor. I had one that it was a Silicon Valley property. The parents were retired, very low income, and they have very low tax rates. They say, oh, I'm going to give it to my daughter. Daughter is a premier engineer at Intel. She's at the highest capital gain rate you could possibly have, highest tax rate you could possibly have. And they say, oh, well, we want to give her the property to keep the local property tax. They would say, well, okay, let's go through the puzzle. Okay, does it make sense property tax wise? Yeah, I guess, if she receives the current property tax basis, she'll have a low property tax basis. That makes sense. She doesn't want to live in the property. But carryover basis, if she sells it, highest possible capital gains. And also this property produced rent, and it produced a lot of rent. It was producing something like $7,000 a month in rent. I also say, you do know that when you give her the property, the rents don't go back to you. They go to her for income tax basis. So, you that are basically living on the rents, the $7,000, because the property is basically paid off, I think the property was paid off, you're basically living on these rents. You're going to basically take these and run them through the highest income tax basis that you possibly could. So you're actually going to lose a substantial amount of the rents because of the income tax. So one has to be very cautious that you're going to redirect some of these. I had another one that also, when they transfer the property, there's a potential problem here, is that when you transferred the property, did you lose the Section 121, the home exemption? It's because, let's say you transfer it to the new owner, a son or daughter, and they already live in a house. So, let's say it was your primary residence. I've seen some people say, oh, I'm going to transfer my primary residence to my kids. And then, that way they can keep the family residence and they can keep the property. One has to understand is that you likely sacrificed the Section 121 exemption for a home, a primary residence, because they don't live in the home. And when you do the calculation, 2 of the last 5 years, they're not going to qualify. So again, if you were husband and wife and you had a $500,000 capital gains exemption, you've now blown the $500,000 capital gains exemption. You've given them your super low tax basis, and they're at a super high tax rate. So to save the little bit of money on the assessment, you've now quintupled the taxes if you ever sell the property. So we have to be very, very careful about Proposition 19 of one side, very good. If we can do it right and we say, okay, I'm good on the property tax. I'm okay with the capital gains rate. Maybe they're in a lower tax bracket, whatever. Maybe the property earns rents, maybe it doesn't. I understand the Section 121 exemption. Maybe it was a rental, it doesn't matter. Then, okay, we start to take a look. But I'm expecting a flood of cases in, maybe April, May, of people, Mike, I have to undo the Prop 19 transfer. It's causing a tax nightmare for me. What do I do? Because we have to make sure that we're not just looking at Prop 19. It's all interrelated. And the same thing with estate gift tax is, of course, when you transfer these properties for the estate gift tax, you're supposed to file a gift tax return. So with the gift tax return, you're supposed to report that to the Internal Revenue Service. Another thing, one has to be very, very careful with Prop 19, especially doing it on your own and doing it somewhat late. Some cities, like San Jose, to an extent Berkeley, and it varies, all over the place. And we actually have to check it, city by city, because actually even I haven't memorized them all, charge sometimes a city tax. San Jose was back in Measure E, when Measure E was on. So if you give, so under the reassessment rules, parent to child, there's no assessment under Prop 58 prior to February 16th. We won't have a property tax assessment. Okay, that's good. The state documentary transfer tax, okay, it's a bona fide gift. We don't have an issue there, but that's the state. San Jose, the city of San Jose, if the property is located in the city, there is a city tax. And it can come about if you gift property that has a mortgage. It can sometimes cause sometimes it could be 1% of the mortgage is the city tax. So you may seek to record this deed, and either the deed will be rejected because it didn't account for the city tax, or you may try to record it and you have to pay the tax. And if the amount's only $200,000, well now there's $2,000 you owe. If you owe $800,000, you owe $8,000 in city tax. So you have to be quite cautious. A lot of people, I think, I'm seeing a lot of these people. Actually, sometimes I'm kind of warning clients. As I had one client that said, "Oh, we'll do the Prop 19 consultation for you. These are our charges and everything." They said, "No. I just my brother knows a little bit. I'm going to do it." I think, well, you better watch out, because again, if you didn't think through all of these taxes and you didn't understand the local rules of, does the property exist in city of San Jose? Is there a city tax? How much is the city tax? Is that worth it to still record? Maybe it is worth it. If it's like $1,000, maybe you say, oh, it's going to be a long-term property, it's worth $1,000. Or you may find, wow, this is really expensive, considering the city tax, the income tax, the rent tax, or the way the rents work. Actually, when I add it up, it's better not to do it. And that's perfectly okay. I think many clients, and like I said, many of the clients that I've counseled, when we go through the Prop 19 analysis, a lot of people said, whoa, okay. Yeah, I want to keep the basis. That would be great. But the cost to do so just doesn't pencil out. It just doesn't make sense. And sometimes, some people, it makes perfect sense. And we go through it and we say, yeah, I have some people, primary residence, huge gain. They bought the house, I think, in the 50s or 60s. Huge difference. One of the children really wants to live there, but not for a while because she lives in another part of the country. They really want to keep it for her, or maybe rent it out for her. Again, primary residence, there's no gains. They don't have an estate tax problem. There's no rent. They're aware of the capital gains thing. They don't really mind. They don't plan to sell it. For them, okay, yeah. Your primary motivation is to keep the property tax low. And if the property tax changed, that would be, for them, which is not uncommon. The current market value is probably $2.5 million. They bought it for $500,000. That'd be going from $5,000 to nearly $20,000, $20,000 to $25,000 in property tax. That's 4 times, 5 times the property tax that they currently pay. Yeah, that 4 times, 5 times the amount, and your objective is to keep the property, not sell too soon. You're redirecting rents. Okay, that one sounds good. But some of the other ones I look at, of commercial properties and things, we take a look at it and we say, ooh, that one we better think through carefully, because that could backfire. And I'm concerned that I'm going to have in the late spring, early summer, a lot of backfiring Prop 19 issues that people are unhappy with. So what should we do? What should we do? Just a little bit about this is, sort of the legacy plan, more than the estate plan. Thinking of this legacy plan, of course, like I always say, consult and make sure that if one has real estate, has children, even if one has neither real estate nor children, make sure, in that case, you have a power of attorney, you have a basic will, you have a healthcare directive. It's vitally important in these interesting times with COVID and all of the concerns that we have, that you have a plan for your estate, of course, your assets, but also for you, your person. What if I'm unwell? Do I have my healthcare directive? Do I have people appointed? And again, we sometimes talk about families, but single persons absolutely have to have this, because under the law, it may not be obvious. College-age children, I think I talked about before, had a case. A young man went to college in Ithaca, New York. He got ill. Sort of texted parents, I'm very unwell. I think I'm going to the hospital. Luckily, everything turned out fine. But his parents are basically calling the hospital in Ithaca, New York, and they say, we can neither confirm nor deny that he's here. He's over 18. We can't say anything. And he was for a period of time, he was under anesthesia. He couldn't respond. They couldn't give any information. Healthcare directive, if they had that, they said, no, we have his healthcare directive, fax that over. They could have talked to the hospital. It was a very, very painful week for my client. Thankfully, nothing happened. But again, sometimes people think of like, oh, well, mom and dad, we're the mom and dad. But now we take care of ourselves. We have all of that stuff. But now you have to start thinking outside the box. College-age children, single, brothers or sisters or other family persons. Important to think about. Tax planning with the estate plans. If you have an estate plan that's really older than 2013, that's got to get updated. And if you have older than 2013 and you have $4 to $5 million, that's really got to get updated. Partly because in 2013 and 2017, the whole estate tax system changed. And it's really not so much the problem with the estate tax system. The estate tax system got better. It got easier to deal with, less restrictive. The problem is your documents from 2013 likely have a lot of restrictions, especially if you have a husband and wife or you have a two-person estate plan. Your plan likely has a lot of restrictions on basically the surviving spouse, that half of this estate is going to get locked up once that person passes. Under the old estate tax laws, you had to do that. You had to lock up half the estate and use their estate tax exemption. The surviving spouse couldn't take the property and take their exemption. 2013, we fixed that. So now the surviving spouse can take the property and you can inherit your spouse's exemption. So you don't need to lock up the trust the same way that you used to. But a lot of those old trusts do that. And it's really, really a pain for the surviving spouse, because you have to file like tax returns, special tax returns on your own property. If you want to sell it, you can't get the other half of the money. That's the big one. The title company is going to look at the title and say, oh, it's the trust. We need to look at the trust. As soon as they see that it's, the AB trust, a pre-2013 AB trust, they're going to lock up the other half of your property. So that's no good. The only way you can get around it is you have to go to court and get the trust modified, which you don't want to do. So anything old, go take a look at. The other thing for, of course, business persons or investors, business planning. Again, take a look at your business documents. If you're a corporation, LLC, on and on like that, because I see a lot of these situations where there's the articles, articles of incorporation, articles of organization, and there's really no thought through plan. The bylaws, don't make sense, or the operating agreement doesn't make sense. And again, in successful times, who really cares? But then when things start to get tough, people start to care and people start counting the pennies, and that could be a problem. It could also be a problem with third parties. You're trying to do the PPP loan, they're going to ask for these things. You're trying to do any sort of dealing with that a tax issue, they're going to start asking you for all of these things. So that's that. Just a couple of closing thoughts before I kind of jump into everybody's questions. The other thing is, use sophisticated techniques when warranted. There are some clever things one can do for estate planning. One of the first things to be aware of that's quite important right now, there was a big change in law, and I'd say at least one good thing that came out of Sacramento last year is our California homestead exemption is now, we now live in the time where it's the case, is now for most Bay Area counties, $600,000. That doesn't sound like much, but before this, it was $75,000. So it's gone up nearly 600%. Basically, what this is that there's a portion now of home equity that cannot be touched by creditors. So using sophisticated techniques, let's say asset protection techniques, now with a larger homestead, maybe you start thinking of, okay, I own my home, I have my primary mortgage. Maybe it's a good idea to have a home equity line. And I could potentially pull that home equity line and shrink my home equity to the $600,000 and not actually have so much home equity exposed. The other thing that I'm counseling a lot of clients on is using that, which is a structure I certainly believe in, I think all planners believe in, is the irrevocable life insurance trust. If you have whole life insurance trust, strongly consider using an irrevocable life insurance trust, or if you're going to buy whole life insurance, buy it through the irrevocable life insurance trust, because whole life insurance in your own hands as the owner is only exempt up to $14,000. It's like 13,600 or something like that. If you have that as an asset and you get into trouble with creditors, it can be taken away from you. The policy can be taken away from you, and it can be sold potentially to whoever is willing to basically continue to pay the premiums, but they will become the owner of the policy. This can all be solved through an irrevocable life insurance trust. A third party is the trustee. You pay the premiums. The assets in the trust are protected. You have a trust protector. You can borrow against the assets if the trust protector okays it. There's a lot you can do with the ILET to protect your assets. So something to think about. We talked about the revocable trust, really 2013 or newer needs to be on there. And then, of course, irrevocable trust. Now is the best time for things like the intentionally defective grantor trust. That works great for Proposition 19 planning. If you'd say, I'd like to give my kids the property, but I don't really want a lot of negative tax effects on this, and I don't want them to be able to sell it while I'm alive. Irrevocable trust. You can grant it to them in the irrevocable trust. You can retain living there. Usually the way that it works is that you grant it into the trust and then they grant you a 37-year lease back, a 34-year lease back or something like that. That's gratuitous, and they can do things like that. But that's a great way to handle Proposition 19 without changing the title. So this is a little bit about me. I'm going to change the size of this more this way, and then I can take a look at some of the questions that we have. So let's see here. So let me take a look at some of the questions. Let's see. Oh, yes, for the, oh, yes, sorry. There's a typo in the slide here. Yes, it's 2025 is the sunset. So the sunset is 2025. Here's a question. This is a Proposition 19 question. So if you have co-ownership and you have the parent and the child each own the house 50-50. So you have the house 50-50 on you starting out as title. What happens if the parents pass away? Two questions here. Property tax question. if we own the property 50-50, and the parents pass away, and they're 50-50, they're after February 15th, 16th, that half will get potentially reassessed unless it's a directly to parent-child and the child lives there, and the gain is not more than $1 million. If you can qualify under all of those prongs, the child lives there, the amount is less than $1 million, then they will be able to keep the tax basis on that half. So that's the key thing. If you have 50-50, you just have to go through the analysis. In this case, let's say the 50-50, it may be okay. It may be low enough that there isn't a problem in terms of the transfer from parents to child. Where could there be problems? There could be a couple of problems. One is the value is over $1 million. There could be a problem there. The other thing is if the child doesn't live in the house, that could be a problem. And then the third thing is when you own and I've had a number of cases on this, parent and child co-own the house. You have to determine whether or not you own as joint tenants with survivorship or tenants in common. A lot of people, if you have the joint tenants with survivorship, it will be the system where you record the affidavit of death of joint tenant and it moves parent to child. But if you hold it as tenants in common, it's going to require a probate. So be careful of what the deed looks like. Irrevocable, the ILIT, the irrevocable life insurance trust, that's just for life insurance. For Proposition 19 planning, what most people do, if you don't want to transfer the property immediately, is you do basically a Prop 13, Prop 58 styled, they call it an intentionally defective grantor trust, where parents grant the property to the children in the intentionally defective grantor trust. They put it into the trust. The kids are automatically the beneficiary. So parents have gifted it away. It's a completed gift. So parents, if they want to sell the property, they could sell it, but they can't get the money back. They want to borrow against the house and they want to get the money. They can't in this kind of a trust. Of course, working with cooperative children, something can be usually worked out, but that's usually the way that one will handle this under the new system, is that you either do a direct transfer or you use an intentionally defective grantor trust, and you use that as the vehicle to transfer the property, which is becoming quite popular. So I know we've kind of done a lot of information here because we've kind of jumped around from sort of risks and general planning, and then we talked a lot about the Proposition 19. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, and then if not, I wish you all the best. And of course, let me put this back for all of you. If you have any question for me, do feel free to send my office an email or telephone call, and I can analyze the situation for you from there.
Michael, there are other questions here.
Oh, great. Let me.
In message to me, from Rose, is a non-AB disclaimer revocable living trust good for someone who owns several homes?
Yes. So basically what I would take a look is at this. So usually what I would do, and this would be one where I'd recommend the person asking the question, Rose, to contact me. For someone who owns several homes, usually the AB, or sometimes we now have ABC trust, is a good way to do it for a husband and wife. You just want to make sure that the trust is, again, post 2013, so that you don't have the problem where the A trust locks up so quickly. So you have a little bit of a problem there. And usually what I also add into these style trusts, of where we have the AB trust, but then we basically have an extra provision in the trust that says, well, if the surviving spouse and all the beneficiaries consent, are we able to move the property into another basket? So can we take it basically not put it in the the surviving spouse's trust, maybe we want to take it out early for some particular reason. Maybe there's a capital gains issue or something. So usually I'd say the general concept is a good idea, but it depends. I'm sorry. I think I misunderstood the question. So this is the non-AB disclaimer revocable trust. I generally, if you own several homes, I probably would do what I said is you would have an AB, but you would have the kind that doesn't lock. You'd have the kind that sometimes they call it a power of appointment. So that system is the better system, I think, where you have the AB, but then you can have the ability to disclaim. Got another question here is the parent-child situation is if you have a rental property, 50-50 with the parents and children, if you just leave the title as it is, after Prop 19 takes effect, there will be a reassessment on the half if you don't do something. And that's the reason is because after Prop 19, the exemption for real property is terminated. There is no parent-to-child exclusion for non-primary residences after Proposition 19. So for that one, if you have a co-owned property, 50 parents, 50 child, that's one that one would want to think about. Do you transfer, you basically have three options. One is do nothing, and you allow the half to be reassessed. The second one is, do you do a direct transfer, and we deal with the income tax, gift tax consequences. We transfer it now in the next 2 weeks. Or do you do an intentionally defective grant or trust transfer? You could do that. Or there's a fourth one, actually. There's a fourth one for this, is do you leave it as it is, where you have it now, and especially if this is an income-producing property, do you do an LLC? Do you put the property into a limited liability company? Because under the Proposition 19, and then with a limited liability company, there are situations where when you transfer 50% or less of the property, or 50% or less of the membership interest, there's no reassessment. So I would probably explore with me, for the person asking this question, either the transfer in the next 2 weeks or using an LLC, because an LLC could also work in this situation.
Okay, from Hugo, if a tenant has not paid rent for past several months, are there options to what are their options to recover the rent? Can the rent loss be fixed through tax return? I guess you were mentioning about
that one's really complicated. And actually, this is one thing for collection of rent. This area for what to do about a tenant not paying rent, super complicated. That's one where basically feel free to contact us. I'd refer you to a landlord-tenant attorney. Because some things, if you're trying to collect the rent, that's going to go under the landlord-tenant system. For some rents, if you are not receiving the rents, there are certain situations where basically you just have no income. It is sometimes challenging to take it as a capital loss because the rent may not be actually a loss yet. So that one's a little bit of a complicated one.
Okay. From Jackie, what's the benefit of transferring property to irrevocable trust?
Okay, basically for the irrevocable trust, a couple of things. For an irrevocable trust, let's say for Proposition 19, using the irrevocable trust, some people want to put the property in the trust for the benefit of the kids. They want to keep the property tax basis as it is. The income tax issues don't look like a problem. That all looks okay. We solved that. But they don't want the kids to be able to sell the properties. They still want to control the properties. They say, yeah, I don't mind if my children get the rental, or if we sell the rental that the money belongs to them. I don't need any of this money, but I really don't want them managing it during my lifetime. I really want it to still have control of the property. Yes, in terms of gift purposes, it's theirs. That account is theirs. It's as if I'm managing it for them, but I want the control. Irrevocable trust is very good for that. Irrevocable trust, when done properly, is a very strong asset protection technique. So if you grant property appropriately into an asset protection trust, an irrevocable trust, and you don't have a creditor problem, the horizon is clear. You say, I don't have any problems with anyone. You don't have any fraudulent transfer. You can basically put that property in the trust, and it can be protected from creditors, potential lawsuits, problems that you may have. The third thing that you can do is if you're a high gross worth individual and the property is very valuable, you can use the irrevocable trust as an estate planning technique for the estate tax to basically remove the property in particular ways where you don't use so much of your lifetime exemption, and you can get it out of your estate, and then the growth occurs outside. So there's really three things you can do with it.
Okay, and is the rental property under a living trust, would that also be affected by Proposition 19? Same thing,
Yes.
right? Doesn't matter what's under a living trust or not.
Exactly. So this is the key thing. The key word is if it's a revocable living trust, keyword is revocable. If it's your ordinary revocable estate planning trust that you have, if that's the trust, after Prop 19, you're under the Proposition 19 system. The only way to preserve the Prop 19 or preserve the old system is before February 15th, you doing either a direct transfer, direct gift of the property, or you use an irrevocable trust that's designed to do this. So yes, revocable trust, not helpful.
Mm-hmm. And then, Michael, I know you need to go back to your class tonight. So do you have time for just two more questions?
Please, yes.
Okay, so somebody asked, I'd like to know more details for over age of 55 to carry over the old property tax base to the new one. The question is, can I buy the new one first and sell the old one and transfer the old property tax to the new one? What's the right process, especially with the Prop 19?
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be, it's a little bit unclear right now. And this was actually one of those things that we were kind of hoping that the Board of Equalization would clarify on this. My big concern, why I think that this may not work, is that the Board of Equalization will realize, and the local county assessors will realize that the old property you took title earlier, it's on the date of the deed, and then if you acquire a new property, and the process, you could have kind of a problem. So like basically the right way to do it is this. I probably should start with this way. What's the right way to do it? First is you should take title after February 15th, 16th. So you can buy. The interesting thing though is, like as the question says, is what if I buy first and then can I move the property tax over? Yes. So you can, after the 15th, you can buy the new property, and then you can transfer the tax basis from the old to the new. Generally, there's a time frame that you have to do it. It's a few months that you should do it. But then when you transfer it, it will cause the reassessment of the other property, the old property. So oftentimes this will be a little bit of a challenge because while okay, you can get the new property and transfer the old tax base, that's good. It will cause the increase in the old one that may cause a need to sell that.
Okay. Sounds like
that was a little, yes. The good thing is, feel free to ask anyone to follow up on that. That will be actually getting a lot easier. I think the over 55 transfers, there will be fairly little problem on that. Let me just answer this one question here a little bit, because this one's kind of a specialty of mine before I drop off to return to my class. This is the question: is if a foreign person during his lifetime transfers all or part of his house to a U.S. relative, are there reporting requirements? Yes, and be very, very careful of this. when someone is a foreign person, a non-resident alien, if they transfer real property to anyone, so if I'm citizen of China or anywhere, any country in the world that does not have a tax treaty with the U.S. There are a handful that have tax treaties with the U.S. So let's say I'm a citizen of China. If I had a real case on this, I'm a citizen of China, and I just give the property to my daughter. Do I have a reporting requirement? Yes. I have to file a gift tax return. What is my gift tax exemption? My gift tax exemption is $60,000. 60000. So what happens to this is they take out, let's say it's $1 million property, they take out, $60,000. They say I made a gift of $940,000, and they hit it with the marginal rates. The highest rate is 40%. So I had almost this exact situation in a real case. They send you a bill for about $300,000 due immediately. And the concern about this is that the person who receives it, the IRS can sometimes lien the property if you don't pay the $300,000. And they basically, like a mortgage, just put a lien on it. A lot of people say, well, how is the IRS going to know? How are they going to know that this happened? Be really careful, especially if you're in San Mateo County, San Francisco. San Mateo County is where the case that I had comes from. In addition to when you give a property away in San Mateo County, you have the deed, you have the preliminary change of ownership report, and you have this document called, that's basically their transfer tax affidavit. And it says on there that I have read and understood Title 26, Section 2033 through 2060, and I knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily make this transfer with full awareness that I may owe gift tax. And they also make the grantee sign and say, and if they can't pay it, I will. And this is a huge thing. So if you are a foreign person, or your friends, yourself, clients, relatives, anybody, before a foreign person makes a gift, please contact us, because this can be a catastrophic situation. And what happens is, like I was saying, is in San Mateo County, you sign those three things. The San Mateo practice is, as soon as they record the deed, they throw it in the fax to the IRS, and the IRS checks. And then the IRS basically checks and says, Juan Diego Sanchez, what was your status on January 26th, 2021? And they say, I didn't have U.S. status. I was a non-resident alien. I wasn't in the U.S. And they say, okay, calculate 40%, $300,000, please. Say, I don't have it. I'm not going to pay it. They say, that's fine. We'll get it from the transferee. Transferee won't pay, lien. And, we'll get paid eventually when you sell the property. And the IRS can do this, they can make you sell the property. So be very careful with that. I'd love to stay in chat. I have to jump back over to my class. Thank you all so much. Please, we kind of went through the questions quickly. Please feel free to email us and contact us so we can talk to you more. And that way we can answer more questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I really, really appreciate it. I know you are actually in the middle of a class. So I let you go first, but everybody say thank you to Michael, and then, but we're going to stay a little bit around just to introduce our next seminar, and then you can feel free to stay around.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot about what to do and what not to do during the process to protect our assets. I hope you have a great class, Michael. Okay, so yeah, for all our viewers, before we end this, I would like to tell everybody about our next 10 seminar. Next week, February 2nd, our CPA Bing Zhai will be back for another tax planning and strategizing session. He usually hosts 2 tax planning sessions annually. One will be at beginning of the year, which is going to be like this coming Tuesday. Another one will be at end of the year. So I know many of you are wondering what is different this year in terms of laws and opportunities after the political changes. So I hope everyone can join us next week for Tuesday tax tips. If you are subscribed to my YouTube, you will be able to see the teaser videos for all of our upcoming seminars. All you have to do is to scan this code. All right, we have come to the end of our seminar. If you would like to stay and network, great. My name is Coco Tan. I will see you next week for Tuesday Tax Tips. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.